at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We got to unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his.
Oh.
And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. Tuesday, November 5th. I'm Dean Obeidallah. As always, hoping to be your MBFF. And today, I'm not trying to overhype today, but I honestly think that in the future, when historians look back at the Trump presidency, they will say Tuesday, November 5th was one of the key days in the impeachment and ultimately removal of Donald Trump as president. If he is removed, today will be one of the key days. They will look back and the headlines on today's paper will be the same as Nixon Watergate type of headlines, which are now archival and iconic images. And the top line, New York Times headline says it all. Key witness revises testimony citing quid pro quo with Ukraine. And as the New York Times and everyone else is documenting, and I have the updated testimony of Gordon Sondland right here, the ambassador, and that is the key witness. As a reminder, Gordon Sondland, as I've called him, the Trump stooge, because this guy gave $1 million to Trump's inaugural committee to get this job. And he's been out there doing Trump's work as one of all the president's liars for the entire time. And I got to be honest, Gordon Sondland's got to be saying, this $1 million I gave is the worst investment of my life because the only reason he's in this job is because he paid for it. He bought an ambassadorship, and now he is stuck between perjury and being a key witness and bringing down the president who appointed him. It's like a sort of a thriller book, like Scott Turow or what was the other one? John Grisham, like a John Grisham novel in a way, where the guy's like he's morally ambiguous. He's stuck between two things. This is what we learned today, and it really is stunning. It really has. It's changed the game because I will tell you at the outset, the only defense Republicans now have left, and they've already started to make this because they knew this was coming, is that, well, what Trump did, it may have been a quid pro quo. It may have been potentially wrong or not something I would have done, but it's not impeachable. And that's they're going to be their fallback. And instead of getting frustrated when you hear that, realize that is the weakest argument left that you have. They have. I mean, that's the weakest argument. That's the best argument they have. They've got nothing else. If they had a better argument, if they could combat the actual facts, they wouldn't be making that. They'd be going, no, it's blah, 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 blah. They don't got that because you can't. There's nothing else to defend. What did we learn today? Let's give some of the details from the testimony and also give it some context about why Gordon Sondland were to switch his testimony, what other people have said. And now that we have Gordon Sondland's testimony, let's look at the timeline. Let's look at what has now been corroborated by people testifying under oath, under the penalty of going to prison if they lied to Congress, what we know. So what we know now is Gordon Sondland, in his new testimony today, made it clear under oath that he himself told Ukrainian officials that military aid authorized by Congress was tied to their commitment to investigating what Donald Trump wanted them to investigate, which was Joe Biden and this crazy Ukraine type of server thing from the DNC. And that's, to me, a red herring. The real thing is investigate Joe Biden. That's what this is all about. The disclosure from him, folks, this was unknown before. Just so it's clear, this is completely new. You might have Republicans going, we knew this before. No, we did not. You know, Gordon Sondland has this rare opportunity to go back and correct his testimony. Most of us don't get that chance. But in this scenario, Congress gives them a chance to correct their testimony. And he did. Because he knew things were not looking good from what other people. In his detailed testimony today, he talks about his own role in alerting the Ukrainians that they needed to go along with the request of Trump to investigate Joe Biden, his son Hunter Biden, and work with Rudy Giuliani. And by early September, Sondland says now in his new testimony, he became convinced that the military aid and a White House meeting were conditioned on the Ukraine committing to those investigations. Here's some of the few things specific that are really important. He talks about meeting with a guy named Andriy Yermak. He's a type advisor to the Ukraine president. And in September 1st, there is Sondland in Ukraine meeting with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, this guy, and who else does he talk about? Mike Pence. Mike Pence was there. And he said there was a meeting there, Mike Pence and Zelensky in Warsaw, and Zelensky had a discussion about the suspension of aid with Mike Pence. So Mike Pence has got some questions to answer. And then Sondland added that he told Yermak, the top Ukrainian official, after the meeting, he pulled him aside and said, quote, this is his new testimony, this is under oath. After that large meeting, I now recall speaking individually with Mr. Yermak, where I said that the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that we had been discussing for many weeks. So he was making very clear, unless you say you're opening an investigation to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and Burisma, you're not getting your aid and you're not getting the meeting with Donald Trump. Just so it's also clear, all the reporting, and it's been confirmed by Mick Mulvaney, the aid to Ukraine was withheld by one person, Donald J. Trump. That's who withheld it. Now, to remind people, this is not in this testimony, the last few weeks, several times I mentioned, and I even cited in an article I wrote, in that meeting with Mike Pence, because I knew Mike Pence had to know what was going on, because we found out that Mike Pence's staffers were on the phone call July 25th between Trump and Ukraine leader, where Donald Trump pushed them to investigate Joe Biden. So Mike Pence knew what was asked in that phone call. He was not on that phone call, but he certainly knew. So when he goes to Poland and the Ukrainian president's there and he meets with him, and in his statement he released at that very time, because he did a printout of the press conference, it's on the White House website, he talked about meeting with the Ukrainian president then and talking about corruption. And I always wondered, did Mike Pence at that time know about Trump withholding the aid to the Ukraine? And the only way they were going to get it was open up a corruption investigation into Joe Biden. Well, now when you look at this very testimony, and I will read from the actual press conference, a line from Mike Pence, I think Mike Pence has a lot of questions to answer. I have little doubt Mike Pence is implicated. I don't know criminally or just morally, but Mike Pence at that press conference, standing there in Poland with the Polish leader, talked about yet day before I met with the Ukrainian president. We had a great conversation, and he said, quote, I told him that I would carry back to President Trump the progress that he and his administration in Ukraine are making on dealing with corruption in their country, close quotes. So to me, was that code? Was he saying, I'm going to take back to Trump? The Ukrainian president told me he will open an investigation into Joe Biden, because it's very clear here. Sondland makes it very clear. Mike Pence and Zelensky had a conversation one-on-one. Zelensky goes, where's the aid, buddy? We need this aid. We're fighting Russians. They're killing our people. I'm adding that information, but he's asking about where is the aid, this military aid that they need. He asked Mike Pence about it to his face in front of Sondland. There's no disputing that Mike Pence had a conversation about aid. The next day he says, Zelensky has made a commitment and great progress on dealing with corruption in their country. Was that code for saying Zelensky has now agreed to investigate Joe Biden? Because just 9 days later, the aid was released. Is it a coincidence that Mike Pence meets with Zelensky? Zelensky brings up, where's the aid? The next day, Mike Pence is saying for the media there, I talked to him, he made great progress. 9 days later, after months of the aid being held back since mid-July, it's suddenly released. Was that because Mike Pence went back to Trump and said, I talked to the guy. They're going to investigate Joe Biden just like you wanted. And if that were to happen, then Mike Pence is involved in a criminal conspiracy to commit the act of extortion. I'm not sure of that. I always tell you when it comes to legal stuff, I do not play games. I'm telling you what it could be based on the facts. We don't have all the facts yet. What else happened we learned today? And this is interesting. So you've got this new statement by Sondland, which everybody's talking about. And what prompted it was testimony by two different people specifically, Ambassador Bill Taylor and Colonel Alexander Vindman, people we've covered on this show, who completely contradicted what Sondland said. And he got a sense he was going to lose this credibility fight because he testified first, Sondland, behind closed doors. And that's why Democrats did the investigations behind closed doors. So other witnesses could not hear it. But there's a July 10th meeting, and still Sondland has not answered for this yet. And he's not disputing it. So this is apparently true. July 10th, two people testified this, but the Colonel, Vindman, testified very specifically July 10th meeting in the White House. Gordon Sondland's there, Ambassador Volker's there, Rick Perry's there, John Bolton's there, and senior Ukrainian officials. Following that meeting, Sondland, in his testimony, said no one in Security Council ever expressed concerns to me about efforts we were acting improperly. Quote, again, I recall no discussions with any State Department or White House officials about former Vice President Joe Biden or his son, nor do I recall taking part in any effort to encourage an investigation into the Bidens. And he adds later, I did not and would not ever participate in such undertakings. That was Gordon Sondland's testimony early October. Then comes Vindman. Then comes Bill Taylor. Testifying about that very meeting. Taylor based what he heard, but Vindman more importantly in the meeting. Vindman says at the meeting, Sondland emphasized the importance that Ukraine deliver investigations into the 2016 election, the Bidens, and Burisma. Quote, and this is Vindman's testimony under oath, and if Trump wants to counter this, let him go under oath and testify and risk perjury. Colonel Vindman testified during the meeting, it was brought up by Sondland, and during the scheduled debriefing that followed it, Sondland said, quote, the importance that the Ukraine deliver the investigation into the 2000 election, the Bidens and Burisma, those exact words, the Bidens and Burisma. Vindman added, I stated to Ambassador Sondland that his statements were inappropriate and that the request to investigate Biden and his son had nothing to do with national security and that such investigations were not something the NSC was going to get involved with or push. So you've got Vindman saying, I said to the guy right there in the meeting, what are you doing? Apparently another person testified similarly. Then Ambassador Bill Taylor, a career diplomat, graduate from West Point, who served in Vietnam as an officer and who Mike Pompeo personally pulled out of retirement to work for the Trump administration as ambassador to Ukraine when they got rid of Yovanovitch, in his testimony, backed that up completely. And that's saying during that the security assistance he was told by Sondland would not go to Zelensky until they pursued their Burisma investigation. So you have person after person backing this up. So Sondland goes, this is why I got a flip on this. Now, he is not, let's be clear, he has not said Donald Trump directed me to do this. It's going to be very hard for anyone to believe that a guy who runs a hotel chain from the Pacific Northwest on his own said, you know what, let's withhold aid to the Ukraine until they play ball with us and investigate Joe Biden. Impossible to believe. Impossible. It is incredible. What we've got now is Sondland making it clear, unless the public statement was made that they were going to investigate Joe Biden, no aid, no military aid. We didn't know that before today. This is stunning. Again, the quote is by Sondland under oath. I said that the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement they'd been discussing for many weeks. And that very statement, according to Bill Taylor, who testified under oath, that statement was Trump wanted Zelensky to state in public, to put Zelensky in a public box. That's the quote. He was ordering an investigation into the Bidens. This is it. This is simple. Sondland's testimony is very clear. $400 million in aid approved by the U.S. Congress to the Ukraine was withheld by Donald Trump's administration until the Ukrainian government agreed to help Donald Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. Period. Full stop. It's that simple. It's extortion. That's what we have. Now, can this be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal trial? Perhaps. Perhaps it can be, but we're not there. We are in a different scenario. We are in an impeachment proceeding. That is not the burden of proof. In fact, there is no burden of proof in impeachment proceedings. It is literally without a burden of proof. It's not beyond a preponderance of the evidence. That's the civil trial standard. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's whatever the politicians want it to be. And as long as Donald Trump is good for Republicans, you're going to have people like Mark Meadows, the congressman today, defending Trump with his tweet saying, the Volker Sondland transcripts lay it out. Real Donald Trump wanted to clean up corruption in Ukraine and ensure taxpayer-funded aid wasn't going to corrupt causes. Only D.C. Democrats could spin protecting taxpayer money into an impeachable offense, adding blatant partisanship. That is the answer to the Republicans. They're not going, wow, this is stunning. Wow, we have a Trump appointee saying there was a quid pro quo. Nope. They're going to go with your defense. And before you get angry at their defense, understand they've got nothing else. Folks, if they had anything else, they would go with it. They've got nothing better. This is it. This is die on the sword for Trump. And for Republicans in the House, they'll be okay because they can't get primaried. The only people who can really suffer are one, Donald Trump and Mike Pence, if they're both on the ticket, and senators in states that are swing states. Those are the only ones who can suffer. And this is all an outgrowth of partisan gerrymandering. This is part of the symptom of that toxic concept of partisan gerrymandering, because House members don't care, because the only way they can get primaried and lose is someone who is more Trumpian comes and goes and gets them. That's how ridiculous we are. I will say that the testimony, though, of Sondland does bring Mike Pence into the orbit here of potential wrongdoing. And if Trump's gone and Pence becomes president, as we talked about before, the way the Constitution lays it out, Pence would have the right as the new president to nominate a new VP. That person would have to be confirmed by both chambers of Congress, not just one, both, the Senate and the House. The person will never get through the House, meaning that seat will remain open. If Mike Pence is then impeached and removed, long shot I know, but if, just enjoy this for a moment, what happens? 3 words, President Nancy Pelosi. I know it took a while to get there, but that's the dream scenario. Long shot, don't count on it. We're going to watch Republicans defend Donald Trump for committing crimes. This is as close as you can get to extortion without it actually being, I honestly think it's the elements of extortion would be here for charging someone with indicting them. Conviction, I'm not sure. Indicting them, yes. Bribery, it's hard to say. I don't like quid pro quo. That's meaningless. Quid pro quo is not a crime. What's a crime is when you do quid pro quo under the color of law, you withhold government benefits to help yourself personally. That is extortion. Quid pro quo is really an element of bribery, different crime. You also have the other felony here, potentially, of federal election violations, campaign finance violations by soliciting something of value from a foreign national. This is where we are. It's a stunning day. All the president's liars, one of them was slightly more honest, only because he was facing potentially being charged with crimes, not right now, but in the future. And I don't think he counted on Donald Trump saving him with a pardon. And I think Gordon Sondland wanted to preserve his name. He's not a Trumper. He didn't like Trump in the primaries. He came around in the general and then gave $1 million to his inaugural campaign committee, which, again, in itself is horrific that that's legal, but it's legal, and got an ambassadorship. Now he's stuck over his head in a situation he didn't expect, because Donald Trump is a master at manipulating the media and apparently people as well. Some people, not us. And Sondland got manipulated and got used in this scenario. So I'm not sure if we see Gordon Sondland testify in a trial, an impeachment trial, later. He would be called. I would expect him to. He's in the administration. I could see the Trump not firing him now to keep him in the administration, then to say he can't testify, executive privilege, and then let the Democrats have to go to court. And what's going on now with the Democrats, I understand they don't want to slow things down, but by not going to court right away and getting a victory on some of these subpoenas being ignored, you're giving Trump the easy path, which is just say no to everything, delay, delay, delay. They'll have to do the impeachment trial without these witnesses. So what you're doing is left with someone reading the statements out loud, not that compelling. Much more compelling to watch Gordon Sondland testify under oath on national TV. That's my concern, thinking this through, what his lawyers would do if I was his lawyers, to be blunt. That's what I would do. I would not fire him. I would keep him an employee of the administration so that you can cloak him with some executive privilege claim, even though it's a BS claim. And then he'll say, hey, the White House is saying I can't testify. I can't come back. I'm sorry. You can read my testimony. I would need a judge to decide this. And the Democrats have made it clear in the impeachment proceeding, they're not going to wait for that to happen. But to sum it all up again, in some new testimony, we didn't know this. Gordon Sondland confirms quid pro quo. And to sum it all up, Sondland's testimony is very clear that Donald Trump withheld $400 million in military aid approved by our Congress to help Ukrainians combat Russian interference and encroachment on their land and killing their people. And the only way Trump would allow that money to flow is if the Ukrainian government agreed to help Donald Trump's 2020 campaign. That's it. Good luck defending that, Republicans, because this is not about corruption. Well, it is about corruption. It's about Trump's corruption. I mean, that's true. But to remind people, if this was really about Donald Trump being concerned about Ukrainian corruption, look, we gave in 2017 hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to the Ukraine. In 2018, our government authorized hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to the Ukraine. If Trump was concerned about corruption, why didn't he ask the Ukrainian leader in 2017 to investigate Joe Biden? Why didn't he ask the Ukrainian leader in 2018 to investigate Joe Biden? Why? It's simple. Because Joe Biden didn't announce his candidacy until April 2019. That's why. That's where we are. So let's take a break. A lot to unpack. A lot of great guests tonight. We got Rob Reiner on tonight. We're going to have on our buddy Danny Savalas. Corinne Jean-Pierre, my buddy, will be here. But let's take a break. I want to hear from you. 866-997-4748. Does this change anything for you if you were on the fence? You probably weren't on the fence. If you're a Trumper, nothing will move you. What do you want to see from here? What do you want to see the Democrats do? Let's talk about it. 866-997-4748. Give me a call. I'll be right back. At this point, the question is not who connected to Donald Trump as a criminal. The